Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, all of our brothers and sisters. Globespan is back in terms of its live programs. The past few weeks, we have been airing some repeat, some challenges with our traveling schedules, but yet we're here back tonight, Globespan, and we would like to welcome all of you, our fellow Guyanese viewers. I'm Noah Singh, the host for tonight's program. Please press the subscribe button on YouTube to get your notification when Globespan goes live. And on Facebook, do like and share the program. Globespan 24/7 is a platform. It's in its sixth year, offering a community service for all voices. The platform invites all political parties, civil and religious leaders to share their opinions and address their concerns. You can contact Globespan 24/7 by calling 631-782-8694 or support at globespan247.com. That's our email address. It's support at globespan247.com. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to tell you our topic tonight is going to be focusing on the US, Venezuela, and Guyana developments, particularly the announcements today from coming out of Washington, D.C. And also we want to talk about Mohamed's, the indictments and possible extradition, and touch a little on the Guyanese inheritance. So join with me to welcome Mr. G.H.K. Lal, public advocate. Offline, I refer to him as the Timex. He takes a licking sometime, but he keeps sticking, he keeps pressing ahead. Our hats off to you, Mr. GHK. Of course, we'd like to introduce to you again Mr. Timothy Jonas, Senior Counsel, who has been the cornerstone of Globespan in helping us to bring a diverse conversation and opinions. Tonight, our special guest is no other than Professor Lloyd Griffith. Professor Lloyd Griffith has quite some achievements, and I would like to just mention a few of them to you. He's Provost and Senior Vice President of York College, Dean of Honors at FIU, that is Florida International University, Provost at Radford University, Virginia. By the way, viewers, when I say Provost, he's literally like a CEO would operate for the curriculum, etc. Our Chief Operating Officer in the business will function. President, Vice Chancellor, fellow senior associate roles, I could just continue on that mode. He's also field of expertise, Caribbean security, drugs and crime, sovereignty, transnational threats. All of those will be very essential in tonight's discussion. Wrote 7 books, some of them being the challenges of sovereignty, the impact of drugs, crime, terrorism, and cyber threats in the Caribbean. He also included in that fictions, Sylvie's Love, and also Caribbean Life, I believe. He wrote for Caribbean Life as well. His accolades goes on and on, awards, recipients, policy advisor roles. Quite an honor to have Professor Griffith on with us tonight. And if you don't mind, join with me just to view a couple of his work. Devin, do you want to go to those two videos of Professor Griffith?
Unveiling a literary masterpiece, Challenged Sovereignty by Dr. Ivelaw Lloyd Griffith. This book demonstrates how drugs, crime, terrorism, and cyber threats converge, shaping the destiny of the Caribbean. 12 years in the making, this groundbreaking study unravels the complex tapestry of challenges facing the Caribbean, including regional analysis and compelling case studies. Grab your copy of Challenged Sovereignty by Dr. Ivelaw Lloyd Griffith with an exclusive 30% discount at the University of Illinois Press or available on Amazon.com.
Sylvie's Love and Loss is a gripping narrative set in the heart of the Caribbean. Embark on an emotional voyage, a journey of love and resilience in Dr. Ivelaw Lloyd Griffith's unforgettable novel, set against the backdrop of Grenada. This captivating story transcends romance, weaving a tapestry of personal triumphs and struggles against the country's vibrant social climate. Griffith's characters, richly drawn and unforgettable, embark on quests for love, fulfillment, and the strength to overcome adversity. From the awakening desires in Sex Lesson to the hopeful yearning for reconciliation. Sylvie's Love and Loss explores the complexities of love, the enduring scars of loss, and the redemptive power of understanding. Prepare to be captivated by a story that reflects the universal human yearning for connection and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Buy and read Sylvie's Love and Loss by Dr. Ivlaw Lloyd Griffith today.
Professor, once again, we want to welcome you to quite a distinction in terms of your achievement, and certainly we see from your vast knowledge, you could have quite a contribution to tonight's discussion. We are entering into the international scene. New York Times today, the Trump administration has secretly authorized the CIA to conduct covert action in Venezuela, according to US officials stepping up the campaign against Nicolas Maduro, the country's authoritarian leader. The authorization is the latest step in Trump's administration intensifying pressure campaign against Venezuela. Professor Griffith, I want to start with you tonight. Venezuela, of course, have one of the largest reserve, over 300 billion barrels of oil. Certainly, it's been a neighbor that has been a bit challenging for us of late. What is your take on this? What do you interpret all of this, and how do you see this over the near term?
Well, let me begin by thanking you, Nohar, for the invitation to not only return to the program, but to join two distinguished gentlemen, Tim and GHK. And before we came on, before we started recording, I inquired whether both of those gentlemen know that they're quoted extensively in my latest book. And I've got to ask you to do a little promotional of that latest book, Oil and Climate Change in Guyana. But to the question you ask, I sometimes like to frame responses to questions like the important one you pose, Nohar, by invoking a gentleman whose frame of reference will be relevant to the conversation. That gentleman is Donald Rumsfeld. Donald Rumsfeld had the distinction of being the only person in United States history to be Secretary of Defense on two occasions in two different administrations. And he made famous a proposition in 1982 in responding to a question about America's involvement in Iraq. He said, you know, sometimes there are known knowns, but there are also known unknowns. He also said that there may be unknown unknowns. And I find it useful to use as a framing Donald Rumsfeld's proposition and say that in the context of the question you ask, there are some things that we know. There are some known knowns. I'll suggest a couple of those. But I think the more interesting aspect of it has to do with the likely known unknowns and unknown unknowns that are caught up in this drama. Here are some known knowns. It's a known known that Venezuela has been not in the good friendship books of the United States for a long time, predating Nicolas Maduro. That's a known known. It's a known known that the United States has been interested in going beyond the Maduro regime. A known known. But it's also a known known that the United States, and you refer to this aspect, has an interest in one of the significant natural resources in the global commons, petroleum, where Venezuela is a significant owner of a vast reserve, and in fact, the world's vastest reserve, as you said. It would appear that it's relatively suggestive as a known known that United States patience with Nicolas Maduro is coming to an end. And it seems as though in the last few weeks, some of the things that have been happening in the context of United States in the hemisphere suggests that that patience is now moving to the actual implementation level. And so I would not be surprised if there is a translation of moving from suggestion of impatience to actualization of impatience with a violent action, whether direct or covert. But I think it's important to keep in mind, and I say this in something forthcoming in a British journal, The Round Table, in a few weeks. Guyana is caught in a rock and a hard place in this respect because there is another known in regard to Venezuela, and that is a claim by Venezuela for a significant proportion of Guyana's territory. Maybe we can find a few minutes to talk about that claim. So that claim complicates Guyana's reality in this imbroglio. And it complicates it because, on the one hand, the United States has made manifest its intent to solidly support Guyana. Guyana has felt obliged, because of its own security limitations, to take on board the support, military and security support by Britain, United States, France, and other nations. But at the same time, Guyana doesn't necessarily find it in its interests to have any military action in Venezuela because the potential blowback and the potential dominoes would be deleterious to Guyana's interests. So there are a number of known knowns. There are a number of known unknowns. I'll leave it at that for a minute. Would love to hear the thoughts of others before we maybe explore some of the known unknowns that are in there.
Mr. GHK, what's your take on these developments here?
Good evening, everyone. It's good to be here with the panel, Senior Counsel Jonas and Professor Griffith. I thought we would run out of time before we get to actual talking with the accolades for Professor Griffith. Good to be here. My fellow Guyanese, my privilege to share with you. Today we heard about the announcement, I think it's more of a leak, about covert CIA action in Venezuela, or the authorization for that. Well, I think, to continue from where Professor Griffith left off, it is just making public. It's just making public what has been stirring there, maybe at some level, not necessarily at an intense level, but it's making public what the intentions and the ultimate objectives are of the US government. Donald Trump is a transactional president, a restatement of the obvious. I'm going to wring your hand and I'm going to back you in a corner like he's trying to do with China, like he's trying to do with others, until you yield to where I am going, what I want. And he wants Maduro out. And he's made that clear. I think the Biden administration has made that clear, but in a more subdued manner. Mr. Trump there's a method to his madness. There's a method to his madness. And when you can come public and say, I've authorized the CIA to go into a sovereign nation and to conduct covert operations, that ain't really so covert anymore. We're talking about what is overt now, at least in the knowledge that it exists. Ultimately, the objective here is to get rid of Maduro and to lay the groundwork for lots of American presence in Venezuela. Perhaps Chevron to be freed to explore, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, and there's a lot of infrastructure to be rebuilt, oil infrastructure, public service infrastructure, and we're talking hundreds of billions of US dollars there. So the prize is big. At the same time, and I'm going to wrap this up and let Senior Counsel Jonas come in. At the same time, we are seeing this gradual escalation. We are seeing this intensification. In the past several weeks, we've had 5 aerial strikes, resulting in 27 deaths, and so-called, possibly some, narco-terrorists and drug smugglers, a word that's in vogue now, and lots of discarding going on there of what are international norms. I think we've gone past the point of restraint. I think there's a readying here now for the next step. And the next step is seemingly to me right on the table. Right on the table, and this is the way it's going to be. The counter to that is that China has tens of billions of dollars in assets over there. China is looking at this closely. Russia, where China is, would be looking, and Iran and North Korea. So all of these have to be factored here. And here we are, Guyana, which we'll come to. Here we are, not quite in the middle, but very too close to this for my liking, too close for the liking of any Guyanese, because we are so small and we are so limited and we are so vulnerable in terms of what we represent. And what my last sentence on this is, from a Venezuelan perspective, the friend of my enemy is my enemy, and that is Guyana. Over to you.
Point well taken. Senior Counsel?
There's so much we don't know, isn't there? I want to put a different perspective on this, Anwar. The more I look at international relations, national relations, municipal relations, I am recognizing that however much you fancy up relationships, whether it's relationships among nations or relationships among politicians, we haven't moved away from the schoolyard. The biggest, strongest boy in the schoolyard makes the rules, and you disobey the rules at your peril, and the consequences are dire and immediate. And questions of morality and natural justice and all of those highfalutin, nice-sounding things are irrelevant. And when you escalate that to Committee of Nations, you can have pretense about the United Nations passing resolutions and creating international law and having treaties and all of that. But the strongest boy in the schoolyard still makes the rules. And if he doesn't like the rules and the treaties and the resolutions that you make in the United Nations, there's not one damn thing you can do. So there's been a flurry in the United Nations when the US bombed, torpedoed, sunk some small vessels in the Caribbean Sea. Nothing you can do. There's no this laughable worldwide awareness that something covert is happening. I think we've lost sight of what the meaning of covert is, if everybody in the world knows about it. But again, there's nothing you can do. So our concern to me is not to look at what international law says, what Committee of Nations says, whether Trinidad supports. We recognize who the biggest, baddest bully in the schoolyard is. And it really for us is to try to understand, knowing that that big bad bully isn't even going to condescend to explain himself to us because we are so tiny. But to try to understand what the bully wants and to see if we can fit that into our own game plan for a mutually beneficial result. I agree with GHK. I think that Maduro has played his last card. I think he's persona non grata and his days are numbered. No one can do anything about that. If that conclusion is correct, no one can do anything about that. It doesn't have to be covert. He's gone. Whether he's, whatever all the nice words they use, extradited, renditioned, or bombed, it doesn't matter. He's gone. We then, if that's the case, we then have to look at who his replacement is. And if his replacement is as adamant about relations with Guyana as Maduro has been. We also have to consider how to position ourselves that we remain under the protection of the US as part of its foreign policy, demonstrating, and I think we have to continue to demonstrate, first of all, support, but second of all, we have to find a way to increase the commercial activity, the military interface, increase America's investment, both militarily and financially in Guyana, because I think that is where our path lies to stability and to a wall against any potential Venezuelan aggression, whether military or political.
Yeah, good. And just to advise our viewers tonight, we have 3 segments in tonight's program. We want to be talking about the US-Venezuelan development and how this would affect Guyana. In addition, Mohamed's new sanctions and a possible extradition. And also we want to be able to cover the Guyanese inheritance per se. To Mr. Sheikh Abraham, good night, gentlemen. Mr. Noha, kindly explain why have you reduced the programming of this interesting channel to just Wednesday? I have a theory. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Abraham. Just to let you know, internal resources is one of the reasons, among the few others, but in terms of us allocating resources to this, it is also very challenging for us. I believe the program have stayed on, Mr. Abraham, because of a conviction that, we have internally. I don't think it's so much of an agenda rather than a conviction for all Guyanese to enjoy and benefit from a better life and also be able to become the citizens that they have been in the past and still are responsible citizens towards the world and their contribution. So it's really a conviction, but mainly it's internal resources. Professor Griffith, follow me for a minute here. I know all 3, including yourself, talked a lot about the possible changes, a regime change of Maduro. There could be another angle in this as well. And just looking back recently, when President Trump took that initiative to bomb Iran without much of any sort of, he gave them a week, but he went in and bombed earlier. The president seemed to act in a way that whereby if he has a plan, he executes it. He doesn't really hesitate. But in a case like this, and Professor Griffith, bear with me in a second, he literally is signaling to them that yes, there are going to be these quote unquote covert activities. In a context like that, he's signaling to them that yes, there are going to be activities on land. But one could also construe that to be, Professor Griffith, that he's given time for some sort of a negotiations to take place. Now, first, there is a negotiation and some sort of an agreement on both sides where Maduro stays in his regime. How would that really affect Guyana, given the fact that Guyana is in the middle of this? It could be a staging ground. They could be using it for surgical strikes, no matter what it is. But Guyana is in the middle. So my concern, or what I would like you to bring out to the viewers, if there's no regime change, how would it really affect Guyana? What's the possibility there? Or going back to Timothy Jonas' comments that if there is, what sort of guarantees do we have in the future that our boundaries would be respected? And of course, there would be some sort of covenant towards our defense. So there's 2 angles that I'm trying to get across there in my comments. Please, Professor Griffith, go ahead.
Yeah, but very good question, framing commentary, Noah. But before I get to that very good question, I want to go back to my known, unknown formulation. And to suggest that in the context of the set of drama that we're talking about, it appears to me, and Timothy referred to an element of this as well as GHK, there is more in the mortar than the Venezuela in the pestle. I think there is a geopolitical set of elements that the signaling, the action, the intent, whether covert or overt, involves much more than Maduro and Venezuela. I think there are concerns about China presence, not only in Venezuela, but the expanding presence in the Americas. Last week, a massive offshore platform from China moved into Lake Maracaibo. What it suggests, what it means is an investment ramp up of China in Venezuela. So my thinking is that this mortar that has Venezuela as a key element in it is a mortar that has Venezuela and other elements, not just the pestle. Now, to your question, Nohar, I think here is where we can see a number of known knowns and known unknown possibilities for a conversation of scenarios. I think the first scenario is to recommend that the conversation doesn't have to be direct action that would involve Guyana. The American military is skilled enough, versatile enough to be able to do a covert or even overt action without using Guyana's territory. I think at first, were I Guyanese authorities or advising the Guyanese authorities about the possible consequence, my immediate concern of any potential replacement of Maduro would be in relation to the question, what happens to the case before the ICJ? Only this 2 months ago, the Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, made it most clear, which he had done before, that Venezuela will not accept the decision of the ICJ whenever it's rendered. I think that has got to be a consideration by Guyana, because we have hung, or quite legitimately and appropriately, we've hung lots of our investment in the future on the success of this case before the ICJ. Hopefully it will be a decision rendered by 2027. So I think that is a consideration about, will the successor of Maduro hold to this position of ambiguity? He's following the contours of the ICJ, but he's made quite candid, quite manifest, quite pellucid actually. They will not accept the decision going forward. I think a consequence of a replacement for Maduro, also would have to do with what are likely impacts on Guyana's investment in this significant resource called the oil. But are there implications for Guyana's investment in other things in that Essequibo territory? GHK has been, among other things, chairman of the Gold Board. We know the massive investment by Chinese and Canadian and other companies in Essequibo in gold. We know that other resources in that area have people interested not only in Guyana, but also in Venezuela. So I think we want to be concerned that insofar as investment opportunities are concerned, any overt or covert action would not, first of all, scare potential investors away. Any longevity of action can do that. But once whatever the overt or covert episode is, that let's assume that we are thinking along the right lines of Maduro's expulsion is what the ultimate target is. Long action can have deleterious effect on Guyana for investment by deterring potential investors from coming at a certain time and impacting how the investments. I think there are a number of known unknowns in regard to any impact on the part of covert action to remove Maduro and his potential successor. Now, it is likely that a potential successor might not be the current ostensible leader of the opposition, Maria Machado. It may very well be that there are other individuals who people either in the Trump administration or other parts of the hemisphere want to see in place as successor to Maduro. Known unknowns.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Griffith. And again, to GHK and to senior counsel, what I'm trying to gather from this segment here is that Guyana, what does this mean for Guyana at this juncture right now? What we have seen is that Grenada, in their discussions with the United States, were able to, for installation of radars at the airport, they are asking for a clear demarcation of their borders with Venezuela. I believe the maritime border. So they are asking for something that's the known. I'm sure there's much more behind the scene. Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister Kamala Bisesar, she was able to get OFAC to lift the sanctions on I believe, the Dragon gas deal, and that is now could come on stream for the discussion with Venezuela. So you have the neighboring countries, they're negotiating and they're having the discussions, and they're able to extrapolate or extract from this current environment what is good for their country. So my question to GHK is that what do you think that Guyana is getting out of this? I mean, because we are in the middle. It is, I mean, the CIA, head of the CIA visited Guyana a month ago. We have seen a high level presence in Guyana from the United States administration. So how is it Guyana could be able to extract something that is meaningful, be it ICJ, as Professor Griffith mentioned, or a defense treaty, within the context of the Monroe doctrines, etc. What is it that we can get out of this?
Well, I think the question poses another question. What leverage do we have? I mean, if we've got leverage, then we are in a position to say, however we say it behind closed doors, to the American powers, the hemispheric assistant secretary to the Secretary of State who has visited us, we've got to say, well, listen, we are caught here. We have been good to America. We have done the right thing by Exxon, an American oil superpower. We have crossed our T's in terms of American interests, and there must be a quid pro quo for that. I heard Senior Counsel Jonas speak about we must erect a wall, and I think that is meaningful. That is profound. And so far, the government has signaled, and I don't think that the opposition, such as it is, differs significantly, is that our doors are open. We are that kind of nation, and we are in that kind of era. And so that's music to American investors' ears. And I mean, I'm talking about real big ones here. And the US government itself cannot help but notice this. The Department of Commerce, the Department of State, and so I think that has to be one of our leading cards that we put on the table. Said, look, whatever has been, I think it's been too much, but whatever has been expected of us, we have exceeded, and that must count for something. Now, what is it that the Americans want? What is it that will solidify or cement them more to us? I think they're very much in our corner because of Exxon being here and Schlumberger and whoever else. And I think that we had this discussion before. You weren't here, Professor Griffith, but certainly Senior Counsel Jonas was, about a military base. And I noticed you said it's not necessary given American range of assets, something that I happen to agree with. Now, but if it comes to that, and if you're talking about CIA covert operations, realistically, as a practical matter, I do not see how CIA operations, in the very nature of them, will not have some sort of movement from Guyanese territory, which drags us in, willingly or unwillingly, to the edge. You keep saying the middle, to the edge of this brewing situation. I want to go back to the Vietnam War and say that we are seeing some Gulf of Tonkin incidents here that led to the actual escalation and deterioration into war. And we've had these boats being bombed. We've had the pressures being tightened around Venezuela, around the Maduro regime. And there is, as I said earlier, the intensity of the White House and the State Department and the Defense Department to get to this. Now, having said all of this, from a Guyanese perspective, I am thinking of what does this mean for us here? Could it be that we are, I'm sorry, could it be that we could become, whether we like it or not, the home for a horde of Venezuelan refugees? If you're talking about covert US action, you're talking about deep into Venezuelan territory. And under the fog of war, if it comes to that, we are hearing about B-52s approaching Venezuela, close to Venezuela. And those are one of the mighty arms in the US arsenal. And so you have that escalation, you have running battles. You are going to have a flood of refugees here. You don't need one soldier here from Venezuela. You're going to have a flood of refugees here. And we've got, as mentioned earlier, we've got gold assets there. We've got the Chinese, Xinjiang, we've got the Canadians, Chi Minh, and I think there's another one. And they've got some massive, massive operations there that are, so the longer that this goes on, or the heavier that this becomes, that this can be a problem for Guyana. What does Guyana have here? Other than to say, look, we are with America, we understand what is happening here. And I've heard President Ali say, and to his credit, in his favor, look, we are a zone of peace. Whilst the others are rattling, some of them in the region are rattling the sabers and beating the war drums, he has been a sober voice, at least publicly, to say, we want to continue to be a zone of peace. And what I'm hearing there is like, look, we recognize that the US has its conflicts with Venezuela. We have our own from 100 years plus. But at the same time, we are calling for some balance here. We are saying that America must do what it has to do, but we also recognize that Guyana has some exposure.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. GHK. Senior Counsel, what could we extract from this? How do you see our vulnerability, and what could we do to strengthen our position? You're muted, Tim.
I smiled when I heard GHK say, discussing President Ali, saying we're a nation of peace. You know, when you go back to the schoolyard, the small wimpy kid, he always preaches peace. He doesn't rattle sabers, to reuse your expression. We can't fight. So of course we're advocating for peace. That's not where you look to see where we can leverage. The only way we can leverage is to demonstrate that we are a more reliable and more profitable trading partner than anyone else for the Americans. I, as you know, have been saying for several years that I would like to see a US base in the Essequibo region. That would be beneficial both politically and financially. Any town in Region 1 that is next to a military base will immediately prosper and grow. The resources that are available in Region 1, I remember a French company had found nickel up there, and of course there's timber and that kind of thing. It provides an opportunity in that new stable environment for serious commercial growth and for routes to be established to Georgetown, to the Pomeroon, which I think we can only benefit from. So I would love to see that. I also feel that we need to be very clear, and we have done this, that we honor our agreement with Exxon, we honor our agreement with all the other investors that are here. We have not always been good about that. Barnum was notorious for not being a reliable trading partner. But under Hoyt and his successes in the PPP, we've improved in that regard. But I think that's where we have to go. We have to show support. We have to show that we're reliable. Now, one of the things that is coming to me is it's a theory that I have. I think that the drug trade is a big part of this. You see, as our systems fail in Venezuela, and as the administration in Venezuela, including their customs and their shipping lines, become more corrupt, I believe that drugs from Colombia that cross over into Venezuela can be exported more easily in a corrupt and porous administrative system. Maduro did not do as good a job as Chavez in keeping the structure. And I believe a big part of what is going on is based on the recognition that Maduro has not kept the drug trade under control. And that is seen by the US administration as a direct threat internally to their internal stability and their internal social situation. So for that reason, again, I think that Maduro's days are numbered. But from our point of view, we have to show stability, we have to show support, and we have to find as many ways as we can to increase US investment, increase US presence, and increase the symbiosis that accompanies business transactions and business investments. To me, that's our holy grail. That's where we have to go.
Actually, Tim, I never knew that you advocate for a base in the Cuba. This is the first time I'm hearing this. Quite interesting.
No, I want to offer a footnote to Tim's proposition regarding a base. And that is to say that, even if only as a reminder, an American presence in Guyana is viewed by others as much more than a potential presence in one part of South America. I think it's important to keep in mind the history of American relations with many South American and Central American countries, and the harsh memories of American presence which for the last several decades has led Brazil, for example, to see itself as a champion of minimizing the extent of a direct American military presence in the continent. So I think there are broader geopolitical implications, not simply a bilateral relationship between the United States and Guyana of a presence. It will mean other dynamics need to be taken into consideration as Brazil and Guyana develop closer relations, energy, security, agriculture, and so on. I think the conversation about a military presence of American military in Guyana raises a bunch of other considerations geopolitical about South America and the Caribbean that we want to keep in mind.
Thank you for that, Professor Griffith. And a footnote from my side as well would be we need to be prudent about our physical health. That is to say, once the Venezuelan oil comes on stream and being able to come into the market at full pledge, obviously we would see a further reduction of oil prices, which would also affect our economy. So it's a good opportunity for President Irfan Ali and the PPP government to be able to sit and certainly carve out what could be a defense treaty for Guyana for the long term, medium and long term, and also protecting at the same time our economic stability and prosperity. I want to pause there for a second and just want to welcome Mr. Colin Singh from Canada. This gentleman has never missed the Globespan program, and we certainly recognize you at all time. So thank you for being in support of us as we continue this discussion. I want to advise all of our viewers that Globespan now is really up. Our programs are now on Wednesday. The first and third Wednesday of every month, Nohar Singh, myself, will be hosting the program. The second and fourth Wednesday of every month will be Dr. Rose, And whenever there's a fifth Wednesday, subject to Dr. Bisram availability, he travels a lot. He more than likely will be on the Wednesday. So we have consolidated onto our Wednesday program for now. Obviously, as things continue to develop in Guyana, we certainly will be in a position to bring back on the Monday if necessary. I want to encourage our viewers as well to support Globespan partners, buyfromone.com. They ship all of your Guyanese style and Trini style food, meat, groceries throughout the United States. And certainly you should try the 7 curries, one of their specialty, the Baigan Chokan roti. So buyfromone.com. If you're living in any of the states, be it California, Florida, Pennsylvania, no matter where, they ship all the West Indian groceries and food. If you're living in Queens, there's Curry Roti Box, and they deliver throughout New York, all the way out to Manhattan, Brooklyn, Bronx, Long Island. That's curryrotibox.com. And please don't forget Travelspan for your traveling needs. Offices in New York, Trinidad, and Guyana. Travelspan number 718-845-0437. I think a lot of our viewers right now are very anxious for us to get into the second segment, which is the Mohammed's new indictments and possible extradition, conspiracy to commit mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, related forfeitures of property, seizures, and provisions. To start with, on the Mohammeds, certainly all indications are they're saying um, they're going to be filing to fight this case. So I wanted to start with Mr. GHK. Mr. GHK, what's your take on what's you see in the near future here with the Mohammeds?
Well, they were sanctioned first. They've been indicted, 11 charges, and the talk is about extradition. Extradition can be a drawn-out process. It can be a drawn-out process, though the government may want to expedite that for its own purposes. Now, wire fraud, mail fraud, I've had a couple of looks at the indictment, and some things just spring out at you. But I think, with all of this business about gold smuggling, money laundering, tax evasion is all is alleged, all is alleged. Let's preface that. And I want to address this in a way that our viewers or our fellow Guyanese who are in America, in Canada, maybe England, elsewhere, wherever, I want you to get an idea of what is going on here. Goals, and I've said some of this on another program. I will minimize that and repeat some of that and then go in another direction. Gold smuggling, you hear that, and you think Gold Board, and you think GHK Lal. And some people have decided, and I don't think they decided on their own, to make me the poster child for gold smuggling. From the indictment says from 2017 to 2024, and involves 10,000 kilograms of gold that were smuggled using seals and boxes that were originally signed off on by the authorities. Now, let me tell you how this process works. First of all, a definition of gold smuggling. By its nature, it's not on the table, it's not in the open, it's not official, it's smuggling like catfish or drugs that you heard about, or human trafficking, human smuggling. It's underground, and it's got a very, very tightly knit band of co-conspirators, collaborators. So I go to the Gold Board in March 2017, and I'm there until February 2020, and we hear about this. What's the process? What's the procedure for export, legitimate export of gold? It's got 4 sets of eyes there. It's got The exporter, whether it's an ounce of gold or 1,000 ounces of gold, prepares his documents, his or her documents. It's got to be a licensed exporter, by the way, and says, we are preparing for this flight, and we've got this cargo, and we need for it to be processed. 4 sets of eyes have to be there, 4 state agencies: the Guyana Gold Board, the Guyana Revenue Authority customs officials, the Guyana Police Narcotics, and CANU. 4 of them. They all have to be there to inspect this cargo of gold, to weigh it, to seal it, and to sign off on it. Then the exporter takes it from there. After that, the Guyana Gold Board does not have any other relationship, interaction with that gold. It goes through the airport, customs again, and whatever arrangements are made there. So when we are talking about smuggled gold, it is happening off the radar, and the indictment says government officials, state officials. So I find myself dragged into this. I was a government official, the non-executive chairman of the Guyana Gold Board for part of the time of the indictment from 2017 to 2020. Now, let me say this before everyone here. All the business of the Guyana Gold Board, whether it involved the Mohammeds or the other exporters, whether it involved a customer with 1 pennyweight of gold to be declared at the Guyana Gold Board, the customers had a right to see me, but they have 2 conditions. They had to see me in the premises of the Guyana Gold Board, in the offices, and the second condition, there had to be somebody else there. There had to be a senior officer there. So nobody's going to come in there and say, I try to come out of that room and say, well, I asked them for a bribe. I try to shake them down. In addition to that, I have had no relationship with the Mohammeds or any other customer outside of the Gold Board during my time there and for years after. So this is bigger than John Doe or Mary Doe putting GHK Lal front and center of this. This goes to the actions that I have contemplated, that I've authorized, are going to put Mr. Anil Nandalal, our Honorable Attorney General, his respect for the rule of law and the rule of law in this country. We'll see what kind of justice system we have. We'll see how robust the president is about misinformation and disinformation. We'll see about where this goes in terms of the Mohammeds as alleged gold smuggling, money laundering, wire fraud, mail fraud, all the rest. Politically, I see the government wanting to expedite this to get rid of a political thorn, a political threat out of their hair. The Mohammeds have every right to fight this. They have signaled that they will fight this. I think this could be a knockdown, drag-out fight, especially given the speculation about how much of their own dark intelligence they have on their former friends. I have not been in that circle of friendship, but their former, so this thing is blowing up here now. The US government, and I'll tell you, there'll be more indictments, and the name I will guarantee you to everybody here, whether it's 10 indictments or 100, whether it's 1,000 charges, I'll give you one guarantee here, my fellow Guyanese. The name GHK Lal will not be in there. But this journey here will continue about gold smuggling and who was responsible and who made the passage clear. You've got to get a set of players who are intimately connected, trust one another, have been doing business for years, long before the PNC came into power in 2015 and long after it has left. As we saw, 5.3 million US dollars worth of gold was seized by the US authorities on June 11, 2024, when the sanctions were announced. Now, where does that leave us here? It leaves us questioning ourselves, what do we have for systems? What do we have for overseeing state agencies, our checks and balances, our watchdogs? What kind of ethical leadership do we have here? What kind of people we have who are looking into what you are going to go into later, our patrimony, our inheritance, which is a better word, and and the diminution of it, the dilution of it. And I want to leave this here and hand over back to you by saying this sentence. Instead of saying what the government, the ants nest that the government has stirred up here by dragging me into this, because they're going to be under the radar here. And I'll tell you, this thing is going to reach outside of Guyana. I want to leave this Creole quote with everybody. I hope I bring a smile to Mr. Jonas's lips. When you dig a hole for your matty, you're digging one for yourself. You're digging a bigger hole for yourself. And that is just what has been initiated here. And this is where this gold smuggling business and all the relationships with who was a friend of the Mohamed and a sponsor and a godfather. And it certainly wasn't me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. GHK. Tim, keeping at the backdrop of what GHK mentioned, the ants nest, the additional indictment coming, and all of these things, I want to pause for a second. That would be the backdrop of what I would ask for your response. But I want to also relate it to President Ali. So just pause for a second. Devin, could you bring up President Ali was awarded a named Times Magazine. I believe that's the next among the 100 rising global leaders shaping the future. So we want to congratulate President Ali for that award or accomplishment there. And staying on the subject of President Ali, his first term is finished him. There are many in the, are saying that his first term was really shared. His legacy really is not going to get the full credit of what was accomplished in his first term. Now, he's less than 90 days within his second term, which is now going to be his legacy. He's announced a slew of announcements: electricity, smart grids, ports, shipping links, gas, energy and power generation, bridges, social health, digitalization. I mean, he's firing on all cylinders. So here's where I would like to guide this, if possible. You're free to, of course, comment on Mr. GHK or what he said in the procedures, etc. But he mentioned about the ants nest. He mentioned about more indictment. This young president who is on the world stage, this is going to be his legacy. Is it going to be what we would call simple man language? Would his legacy be muddy? Would he be associated indirectly or directly with these type of allegations? I mean, how does this affect his presidency and his legacy? I mean, if you could kind of converge those two together. Tim?
I think one of the tragedies of our society now, Nohar, is that Guyanese don't care. You are a loyalist to your party. If your party rigs elections, you hope they succeed. If your party is corrupt, you challenge the people who accuse them of corruption by saying, prove it, as if anybody can prove corruption by hard evidence because the people go and sign documents saying, yes, I'm corrupt. So you support your own. So nobody cares about that. And if you want better evidence of that, you only need to look at the fact that the WEN party was under a cloud of sanctions and won more votes than the PNC, the permanent party in Guyana since independence, despite that cloud of sanctions. And when you look at the social media comments on all the dirt that the PPP threw at the WEN party through the campaign season, there were photos of party leaders with naked and scantily dressed women, and the response from the social media keyboard warriors was well, at least we know he's not homosexual, introducing our homophobic culture again. Their response to the Lamborghini issue was the PPP had to know about it, and they were hand in glove with the corruption. So there's no attempt to show that you are innocent or of a higher moral quality than your competitors, and there's no need for it. It's as if everybody's fighting in the mud, and everybody likes the mud, and everybody's muddy. So when you speak about a legacy, marketing is more important than truth. And I'm afraid that's where we are. And we are so accustomed, so climatized to the nasty politics that is Guyana. I don't think most people care very much. So what you end up with is the loyalists touting for their own and cussing on the other side, and it'll be exactly that way all the way through. Now, you're right, there's an effort by the government to show that a lot is being done. And let me say a lot has been done. There's an economic boom as a result of gas and oil, yes, but also assisted by our open market approach to things, where you are seeing buildings going up, you are seeing construction happening, new companies, new organizations. The expenditure of money in this country is unbelievable. You just got to drive up Heroes Highway to see the new organizations going up, the new hospitals, the new ventures, the new businesses. It is astonishing. I don't attribute that to any extraordinary new economic policy. Gas and oil came, therefore the investors came, and the government was wise enough to step back and let it all happen. So it's chaotic, but as someone said to me recently, rapid growth can never be painless. There will always be problems. So what legacy are we talking about? The response of the WIN party to these charges, and I also read the charges, and let me be clear, these are charges. These are not facts. These are not convictions. No one knows if they're true or not. This is what is alleged by the district court in the US. I can't remember which court it was that
Miami-Dade.
announced, yes, the Dayton court that announced the charges. That a box of gold was stamped with the two stamps required, the Guyana Gold Board and the Guyana Revenue, the customs, and left Guyana and came back empty, but with the seals intact, and again was filled with gold, and again sent out of Guyana under the protection of those same seals which had been used for the previous export. Whether it's true or not, no one knows. But how it works in Guyana is that when you got a gold mine, you are obligated to keep a register, keep a ledger on the mine that records all production of gold. All that gold has to be sold either to the gold board or to registered purchasers. So from the time the gold comes out of the earth, the system contemplates that it is checked, it is recorded, and it is traced all the way to the point that it is exported. That doesn't mean the system works, because if I don't want to pay you your 2% royalty, all I have to do is not declare the gold when it comes out of my mine. And if I have relations with the Generalissimos in Venezuela, when their economy crashes because of US sanctions and all they got is gold, I can buy their gold cheap, and therefore I have gold available. And if I can find a way to get that gold to a buyer who's not too concerned about where the gold comes from out of Guyana, it can work. To me, the real tragedy, the real shame that no one's looking at is that in those indictments, in those charges, the offense is that Guyana has been deprived of tax revenue from the export of this gold. So the loss is tax fraud in Guyana. Whether it's proved or not, Not my problem, not my business. The only way the US claims jurisdiction, claims even to have any interest in this, is because it says some of the money in the purchase of this gold passed through a US bank. What on earth is the matter with our government and our systems and our prosecutorial system and our revenue system and our customs agents that, as a matter of record keeping, we can't identify, investigate, and prosecute the kind of charge which obviously is taking place in Guyana and, if true, is hurting Guyana? But that got to be done in the States. So what we are admitting then is we are a failed state. And what's interesting is I see PPP loyalists who are in the know because they announce it on Facebook before it happens. They're saying, wait, something large is coming. The Mohammeds are in trouble, wait and see. So they know, they're in the know. And they're not recognizing that when they crow, because they heard a whisper about US acting, they're acknowledging the failure of their own systems because they can't prosecute and enforce their own rules and their own laws. We have to fix our systems, and I think for me, that's where the problem is.
Oh, that's a really nice piece, because I really want to ducktail back to what you said about the failed state, Guyanese being robbed, and what is wrong with our system. But I just pause for a minute again. I just want to recognize another Guyanese, Dr. Mark Chatterpaul. He's the executive director of Hunters College, New York Food Policy Center, where he leads efforts to develop intersectoral, innovative, and evidence-based solutions to prevent diet-related disease and promote food security in New York City and other urban centers. Professor Griffith, looking at your accolades, us talking about people like Dr. Mark Chatterpaul, Guyanese, who are making significant contribution outside of Guyana. And dovetailing that back to what Timothy Jonas just talked about here, our inability to police and prosecute our wrongs. Now, in the backdrop of that is that the Guyanese inheritance. And just taking it from a godly standpoint, we were born in Guyana. We're now contributing towards the world economy from Dubai to all over the world, Washington, D.C., California, the Caribbean, we have been contributing. The inheritance that we were born into is forestry, gold, bauxite, diamonds, manganese, sand, stone. I'm running out of time here. Agriculture, hydro, of late oil. We are born rich people. I mean, very much a substantial amount of wealth that we are born into, but yet we are building other nations, and our majority of our people are still in the state that they are in. Professor Griffith, how do we get our Guyanese people to a point of what Timothy Jonas is talking about, where we could police, we could prosecute, we could be accountable, we could be unaccountable in the sense that question our own. If we voted for a government, then we should be able to address the concerns that we have so Guyanese can realize their full potential and, I guess, equally or probably more importantly, the inheritance. Professor Griffith, give us some guidance here. How can they realize the riches that Guyana has to offer them?
Very good question, but I want to, as I've done before, look back to something that was said earlier and then come to that direct question, Nohar. And I want to associate myself with you and others in extending kudos to President Ali on being listed among the 100. But I want to recommend that the conversation about legacy should not be only in relation to whomever is the president. The conversation about legacy and fallout potential from the Mohammed's indictment should be broadened to look at what the likely impact and implications for the society writ large. And I want to recommend that we are likely to see some of those implications, some of those fallout elements impacting democracy in how it manifests itself in the evolution of our political parties. Think for a minute how WEN came into being. WEN came into being in the backs of Mohamed. WEN is a manifestation of a personality, uniqueness, and a philanthropy. WEN does not have deep organizational breadth and strength. And therefore, ask the question, what happens if either by way of the legal gymnastics before anything happens to move him beyond Guyana, or if he is moved outside of Guyana for prosecution, for trial, what happens to that political party WEN? What is the survivability likelihood beyond a year or two? And what, therefore, in the context of how the devastation of the September 1 results has meant APNU, PNC, what happens if there is no WEN and there is an emasculated APNU, PNC? What happens to the democratic edifice? How many parties will rule Guyana? So I'm suggesting that the conversation needs to be broadened beyond President Ali and a legacy, to begin to think about what are the implications of Mohamed's absence, whether short-term or long-term, for this political party, which has garnered such a significant amount of support. It has displaced a party almost 70 years, which for the first time in Guyana's history is not in the government or the opposition. What might that mean for a future of Guyana? Not thinking only in terms of the 2030 elections. I think the conversation about legacy and implications need to go beyond president, whomever the president is. No society, whether you're a society as young as Guyana is, with an infusion of resources, and I want to pause on that to say, Nohar, not only do I associate myself with your commentary, the wealth, but there's an omission of one significant natural resource which has not been in the conversation recently, that is there in this same Essequibo: uranium. I give the details in my book, Oil and Climate Change in Guyana, in talking about the Essequibo, the value of the Essequibo, highlighting not only the gold, the bauxite, the manganese, but the uranium. The current vice president of Guyana, Bar Jagdeo, when he was president, made a trip to Iran. Why? President Ahmadinejad invited him because Iran was interested in prospecting, exploiting Guyana's uranium. I have the details there. Didn't go too far for reasons which we suspect and know. But let's not undervalue that Essequibo richness, that Guyana richness in natural resources includes that very valuable resource called uranium. But even if Guyana didn't have uranium and gold and all those allied resources, even if it only had the oil and gas, you cannot have an expectation of adequately building and exploiting unless there are three fundamental variables in that development matrix. One variable called institutions, educational, legal, and other. One variable called values. You know, I make the case in the last chapter of this book that the oil and gas conversation we're having, adequately and appropriately so, should not only be a conversation about the technical, the managerial, the resources in the natural resource fund. It should be a conversation about values, honesty, where there's a deficit, respect, where there's a deficit, recognition of the value of empathy, where there's a deficit. So I'm suggesting to you, Nohar, that we have got to build these institutions. I'm delighted to see that efforts are being made to invest in some institutions. You mentioned Mark Chattapal. Don't know the gentleman. I think I may have run into him once or twice. But I am delighted that among the contributions I made as Vice Chancellor was to inaugurate an institute, something that is still there years after I've left, an Institute for Food and Nutrition Security. Because even though we were talking about oil and gas back then, I kept saying, Guyana has too much to go for it, to only look at the oil and gas basket. So I remember going to Barbados, recruiting a gentleman who's now still at UG. Let's get this food and nutrition security. So we've got to focus on investing, enhancing, strengthening institutions. We've got to do something about values, and this conversation with values is not a conversation that we should be led by only people in the political sphere. We pride ourselves in Guyana, Nohar, GHK, and Tim as being a society that is faith strengthened, whether it's Hinduism, Islam, or Christianity. We believe that we have, even if it's only platitudinous, attachment to those. But we need to translate that into having the faith-based leaders be part of the conversation with shaping societal values that really are grounded in some of those tenets of those religions. So values has got to be part of the conversation. Institutions got to be part of the conversation. And honesty at all levels. Not only, as Tim quite rightly said, for your people, my Mati, it's got to be everybody's Mati and how the society writ large may profit in equitable ways in moving forward. So my long-winded one Guyanese minute commentary on that.
No, it's not. It's well needed, Professor. I myself has become an admiring Globespan because we have talents and in-depth discussions, guests with such accolades and background that is really could be transformational in terms of our society. By the way, there is someone in my house. She's probably upstairs listening to this program. I think you just got a fan when you start talking about values and honesty and integrity and all of that. So something we've been trying to get across from on Globespan. But I really want you to know though that these are the type of conversation we need to have. Not the cuss out, not the whole set of drama that we see in many cases, but we need to nation building. And it wouldn't only come from within Guyana. Also, I think it was Vincent Alexander in one of his appearances mentioned how important it is for changes to come from the outside. Ms. Nirvani Prasad posted, if they were muddy, find the muddy parts and put it out there with evidence. And I think Nival Sita posted something about the legacy is really about Jack their fourth term. So they have different opinion on this legacy. To my point about Mark Chattapal, Professor, I never met the gentleman myself. But the purpose of Globespan bringing out these sort of accomplishment by Guyanese is to show the enrichment of our people all across that could be able to be transformational to our country. And we all have a role to play because we all will have to answer at some point, what did we do with the talent that we were gifted for? Having said that, I want to move on to Mr. GHK. Mr. GHK, we're running into program time. I mean, these discussions are so in-depth and so valuable to our country. But I would let you make your closing comments in terms of what part do you want to cover from this? Is it the Guyanese inheritance, accountability for what we have, what Timothy Jonas spoke about? So I'll let you just get free rein on this one. Go ahead, Mr. GHK.
Well, thank you for that. And as you know, and I think Timothy knows a lot in the audience, it's a theme that I have been pounding repeatedly in different forums. We've talked about strengthening our institutions. I am with you. If we're going to have a legacy of which we are proud of, our institutions have got to be way, way better than they are. And how do our institutions be better? They are inanimate objects. People activate them, people energize them. So we come back to what you have talked about, what I like to call ethos, the ethos. You talked about values, and I used to talk about values and virtues. And so we come back and here it is in the middle of our program, 2/3 of the way, we were talking about gold smuggling and wire fraud, and another country essentially identifying where the holes are. And I will take the free rein and go to Brother Timothy Jonas and say, when the Royal Canadian Mint and the London Bullion Market Association said, you've got to account for gold that you send to us for refinement from the mine to the market, and I said, well, this is the way it's got to be. And you can imagine the hell that I had to face. And today to come about and to have your name, to suddenly be a friend of the gold smugglers, to be their brother and their co-conspirator, that has to rankle. And so when you go and we talk about legacy, when we talk about patrimony, when we talk about the way forward, it has got to be with the people who have got some essence in them to make those words come alive and to say, this is what I am about, this is what we are about, this is what Guyana is about. So we've got to live the talk, walk the talk however you want it. So you go to a gold board, you go to the office of the president or the office of the vice president or the office of the leader of the opposition, whoever that is. There must be a sense here that, politics aside and real politics considered, that we are dealing with people of honesty and honor. And unfortunately, sometimes, many times, I find myself questioning that, and not just slightly questioning that. And so, unless we have a tremendous transformation, we are not going to have any legacy to talk about. We are going to continue choking one another in the eye, stabbing one another in the back, kneecapping each other, skull crushing. So we've got to come to that place and be honest with ourselves and say, Lalin preaching here, no har singing preaching. We are talking about the territory that we have and how we as citizens, we as contributors, whether we are in Ivelaw Griffith's territory overseas, Mark Chatterpall's territory, the Trolls' territory, we've got to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, you know what? I put forward the best that I can, not just for my party, but for Guyana. And when we can do that, for my neighbors, for the people in the opposition camp, for the people who disagree with me, then I can say that we have started on the road that we can talk about legacy and get the best out of this inheritance that we have got. And with that, I say thank you for having me here. God bless you all. My pleasure to share here tonight.
Mr. Sheikh Abraham posted, Mr. Jonas, the content of Globespan is that it's mature, factual, and unbiased. So we want to thank Mr. Abraham for those really positive comments. Timothy Jonas, we had a series of different discussions tonight. US-Venezuela, how is that going to affect Guyana? Possible Mohamed's extradition, and as you pointed out, innocent until proven guilty, but the lapse is really, the bigger picture involved with that would be our lapse, our inability to police and our own system. Then we also had the distraction probably of from the legacy of President Ali, possible distraction given what's happening here. And also we talked about the Guyanese inheritance. I was told to use the word Guyanese patrimony, but I wanted to use that word inheritance term so that all Guyanese could understand this is something they were born into. Inheritance is something you get without having to work for it. And they were born into these riches, and they have not been able to realize it. I talk a lot, and Globespan talks a lot about the accomplishment of Guyanese, but so not often enough we talked about do we talk enough about the sufferings of Guyanese over the years? So Tim, you choose, free reign, your closing comments.
That's a tough one, Noah. Thank you. First of all, it was a pleasure to be on the program with you three gentlemen. I hear what you say about Guyanese patrimony. Now, it raises something. As you know, I'm all about systems. So I criticize because our system doesn't allow us to investigate and prosecute free of fear or favor. Everything is corrupted, including the police force, the investigation, the prosecutorial arms, but I'm about systems. And what I'm seeing is that gas and oil is making Guyana such a hugely attractive place for investment and making Guyana and the few Guyanese, we're only 750,000 in Guyana, maybe another 500,000 out of Guyana, potentially very wealthy. I am seeing people coming to Guyana and applying for Guyanese citizenship. And as a system, because that supply and demand system has suddenly reversed, that now the demand is huge, everybody wants a Guyanese passport. I'm afraid that the government has done nothing to recognize that change and to curtail it. If I had my way, in 5 years or 10 years, a Guyanese passport would be the most precious passport in the world, because the few Guyanese there are, combined with the amount of potential wealth that we are seeing, should make a Guyanese passport. We should be first-class citizens throughout the world. But if we recklessly, carelessly allow foreigners to come in and apply for Guyanese passports, as we are doing and as we've already seen, so that foreigners now own mining concessions that on the law are only for Guyanese. Foreigners now can apply to central housing for housing, can apply to government for preferential treatment and tax relief, can apply for timber concessions. Because they've applied, they've come here, they've lived a couple of years, they've applied for a Guyana passport, and suddenly they're citizens. And on the cover of that, all of this is happening. I think as a system, I would like to see the government impose very, very strict control on who they allow citizenship to. The Constitution says you can apply, but it doesn't say you have a right to become a citizen. It imposes minimum qualification standards for the application, not mandatory qualifications that you must give people citizenship. And we need to protect our patrimony for people who are Guyanese, for people who endured, for people whose families, whose ancestors endured slavery, endured indentureship, came up through the horrendous days of Burnham, the marginally better days of White, endured the problems that we have faced. That is the group that should benefit from our patrimony. But if you look around Guyana now, you see plenty of people who are not Guyanese, but who are benefiting. And that's something we need to welcome our investors. We need to treat them well and treat them fairly in a level investment playing field. But we need to protect our own patrimony and make that Guyana passport a thing of value that I think it should be.
Well, really good comments. Devon, if you don't mind, I mean, it's not often we have someone like Professor Griffith on with us. Extend us a few more minutes, Devon, and let me extend those few minutes over 2 or 3 minutes. Professor, on your closing comments, please.
Thank you. Allow me to begin by thanking you, Devon Nohar, for facilitating participation tonight. And I learned a lot from the engagement with Tim and GHK. One of the 2 sets of comments, and the first of which is to pick up on something that Tim said. A good friend of mine right here in New York, Dr. Dan Paul Narine, had a book launch of my new book, Oil and Climate Change in Guyana, a couple of weeks ago in the library in Richmond Hill. And Dan Paul was talking about his recent visit to Guyana. He was there for the elections. And at a place along the East Bank, he was interviewing people. Every one of the people who he interviewed, he was asking them where they're from. It took him to get to the 13th person to get a Guyanese. The first 12 people were from someplace else, and some places that are very far away from Guyana. I make that point, I share that anecdote to suggest to you that, as Tim quite rightly said, he didn't use these words, Guyana is becoming a magnet because of the oil, because of the gold, because of the agriculture. But 5 years ago, when I wrote about this issue, I said the magnets tend not only to attract the good guys, the magnets can attract the bad guys. And my worry is that, and it comes back to the point about institutions, if we don't sufficiently strengthen the institutions of national and territorial security, we're going to have an inundation of some of the bad guys. Some of them they don't have to come physically. I highlighted Guyana, I flagged Guyana as a place that needs to place more emphasis on cybercrime. Some of the bad guys, some of the magnets are going to be using the technology to wreak havoc on individuals, on corporations, on the government. The book, one of which Nohar previewed, Challenge Sovereignty. I have examples, including in Guyana, of the cyber criminality in the last 5 years. So my point is that as we become a greater magnet, and we cannot avoid the magnetism, Guyana needs the more talent from outside Guyana, some of whom are not Guyanese, but we also have to protect by strengthening the institutions, physical and technological, to ensure that the place is a wholesome place, not only attracting good guys, but managing the bad guys who are going to come. Here's my second point. One of my favorite writers of all time is a gentleman called Rabindranath Tagore. First person in 1913 from the global South to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. When some of the folks in Guyana at the Indian Embassy learned of my great respect for Tagore, I was invited to do a fabulous week in 5 different states of India. But Nohar, I had a special opportunity to give a lecture at a university in Calcutta dedicated to Rabindranath Tagore's legacy. And I quote one of Tagore's favorite sayings of mine in that Guyana Oil and Climate Change book. And here's what Tagore said that is relevant for my commentary here. He said, "You cannot cross a sea by standing and staring at the water. You cannot cross a sea by standing and staring at the water. 2 things are required. You've got to have an intentionality to cross the sea, and you've got to have the action to cross the sea." Guyana is at a cusp where intentionality and action are manifest both in intent and in practice. But it is how we do the action, whether or not we practice, as I recommended the final chapter in this book, where GHK is cited as an example of that. Whether we practice what in Latin is called audi alteram partem. Listen to the other side. The other side may not be pleasing, you may not like what they're saying, but to strengthen your capacity for action that is positive, you've got to hear other sides. Listen to the contrarians. I think as we move into a new phase, the oil bounty, whether it's in regard to the production sharing agreement, or to the oil spills, or to the use of the patrimony called the Natural Resource Fund, there is supposed to be, in my view, more inclination to audi alteram partem. Listen to other sides, and then act on some of what the valuable things from the other side coming to you is all about. Take those and act on them. Thank you, Nohar, for being here, and good night to GHK and Tim.
Well, words of wisdom indeed, words of wisdom. And the fundamentals of Globespan formation was based on bringing in all sides. So viewers tonight, my fellow Guyanese brothers and sisters, count the cost. Count the cost of your, what are you losing from your patrimony, from your inheritance as a result of our actions and in many cases our inaction. And by using the word inaction, I want to encourage you to become ambassadors. Speak to your fellow Guyanese, be it in outside or inside of Guyana. Let them come to an understanding of counting their cost for what their actions can result into. Saying that, I want to thank all of you guys. You came back on very strong. Our YouTube audience was very strong tonight. I really appreciate it, and certainly it was a pleasure, Professor Griffith. It was such an honor to have you on tonight. Mr. GHK, it's always good. Many people always commend you being on this program. And Timothy Jonas, quite a few comments of you being on point as always. So thank you, gentlemen, and viewers, thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. No,
Stay
gentlemen, it was a
blessed.
pleasure.